Hello, RC Rodder back here with Vantasy again. Of course, we've got all the sway bar back on and all the front suspension all back on. I do have to work on my rear heat lines, as you can see next, unfortunately. They're all rotted, so I'm going to completely do away with the rear heat because I've already done away with the rear air. So I have to get up there and bypass that. But anyways, today we're working on the brakes. And for right now, I'm just going to do new calipers, new hoses, and new front brake pads. I'll do the rotors come spring. But nice thing is, these loaded or unloaded calipers here, but they came with brand new pins. These are always a good thing to replace. And it's always good if you're going to do this to make sure that these are actually sliding good like they should be here. These are greased up really good. Also, just something, you know, if you've never tackled brakes on anything before and you are going to do this on your van, these washers, they come with two when you use them to put your brake line on to your caliper here. And you got to make sure one of these goes behind and one of these goes on top. And these are crush washers that are made out of copper. And they're made to crush between the bolt and the line boss, the square end down there, and then crush between that and the caliper itself to get a really, really good seal. These things will seal your brake lines up pretty good. Up here on my 95, it's a 1/2-inch line wrench. So, and of course, once you open this up, make sure you have yourself a catch pan down below here so you don't end up with a mess on your floor. So, of course, there's no easy way to do this, and nobody has ever at this point in time invented a nobody at this point in time has invented a ratcheting line wrench. I'm not even sure how you would go about doing it, but if somebody could invent something like that, they'd be rich pretty quick. But anyways, you get your line off here. Once you get this line unhooked, luckily mine came right unhooked. Sometimes them lines don't, and if it looks really rusty, your best bet is to hit it with a torch and just use a propane torch and get up in here and get that broke free. And what you do is you heat that line up a little bit right there on that fitting. You heat that up, not till it's cherry red, but you heat it up and you squirt it with water. And that makes that thing expand and contract. You can also squirt it with a little bit of penetrant, like JB80 is good for that. But usually I just use water and I can get them to back right out, because you don't want to snap that line if you can help it. If so, you're going to have to replace that, and that's going to be a pain in the butt. But anyways, I'm going to let you go and get this off. But once this is loose, then you've got to take a pair of pliers, grab this clip right here, slide it straight out. Then you'll have the line. Had a 13mm nut on here. Be careful with this bracket. This bracket is actually attached to your ABS wire, so you don't want to hurt that if you can help it. And that'll take that off there. And then once I get her off here and set aside and get ready to put the new parts back on, I'll be back with you guys, so stay tuned. Alright, so I'm back. I got my brake hose off, got my caliper off. While I was right here, being as how I'm not going to replace these for the time being, I went ahead and knocked off the rust on them, and you can put a like a pry bar here and set it here against the rotor and spin the rotor, and you can kind of get all the loose rust and everything off from it. That'll help. But I figured while I was right here, I was going to go ahead and double check the tightness of this, and just since I'm going to wait until spring to replace the rotors, I went ahead and took that front bearing out, packed some more grease in there. Of course, my bearing packer tool is broken. I didn't realize that till I went to look for it. That's the irony of it all. So, of course, these are workman's hands. If you don't have a packing tool for the bearings, you have to put a little grease on the palm of your hand, make sure they're good and clean, and you have to push that stuff into the bearing by hand. It's gross, but it gets it done. So now we're back on. I've got everything torqued properly. We've got a nice spin to it. It's not, you know, Sounds really good and stuff. Still got some rust behind it, but that'll eventually go away. But yeah, so make sure once you get this done and you get that torqued where it goes, you might have to tighten it down and then back it up just a little bit until you find where the key goes. Be sure to put your cotter key back in. That cotter key keeps that nut from coming loose and this from coming off when you're going down the road, and that's never a good thing. Once you're done, put your cap back up there. Just a good little tap. Carefully, don't smack this thing hard. You do not, I repeat, you do not want to smash this end down around that nut. So, alrighty. So, once again, back over here to the new caliper. We've got the, this happened to be on these, an 11 millimeter. And we got the copper washer behind it, and then we got the brake hose, and then we got the copper washer, and then you got the bolt. So this is all ready to go, so I have to run back into the house because apparently I don't have my new pads out here. But yeah, so we'll get back with you shortly when we get throwing this thing back together, alrighty? Stay tuned. Okay, we are back. Actually, the brake pads were actually over on my bench, and I went all the way in the house for nothing. I just had to move some things to find them. Luck would have it. So, the new calipers come with this little bracket here. Sometimes you can reuse the original ones, but if you got a new one, always use the new one because these things rust real quick. So, you got to put it facing down, clamp it right on there, and then you face it down. That way, the top of this pad is held in place. Whoops. The top of the pad is held in place by the top of the caliper up here. Put this in there, and she locks right down in, just like that. So, now let's see, of course, we've got a left and a right side here, so we're going to come around this way. That rotor's going to be spinning. See, the rotor's going to be spinning this way, so I want that wear guide to be up here on top in the back. I do believe there's room for it. Yeah, so... Alright, so now that we've done that, of course this one here, we're going to have to put on here in a short when we start putting everything back together and stuff. We'll have to slide that one in here because these here actually go up here like this. And they kind of sit there like that. They're going to be kind of a pain in the butt because while you're putting the caliper back on, you got to hold these up and hold these in place. And then when you put the pins through to hold the caliper on, the pins actually go through the end of these, and that actually holds, I'll show you here on the other one, the pin actually holds these in place. So the clip holds the inboard pad, and the outboard pad is held in place by the pins. Of course, this one has shims on it. Be sure to check your originals. If your originals had shims, be sure the shims are on the new ones. Sometimes they don't, sometimes they do. I think it's just manufacturer's choice, or I'm not even sure. I've even seen the same vehicle have one have them and one not have them. So, and that's from the factory, so I don't know. Anyhow, so I'm going to let you go because I can't do this one-handed. And when I get the caliper up on there before I throw the pins in, I'll be right back with you guys. Stay tuned. Okay, so we're back. Got the hose on. A note, just something to keep in mind. Let me get a little better lighting up here. So when it comes up here to this line, you're better off to put the line up there where it goes and spin your fitting into the line. Make sure you don't cross thread it, but spin it in, and then once you get it started, then actually line the hose up with the hole in the metal bracket and put your pin in, or your clip. Slide your clip in there. You have to use a small hammer to tap it up into place. Then you can go ahead and finish tightening that down. Don't forget this here, and also don't forget when you're putting that bracket in that the ABS hose hooks to the hole, or hooks to the bracket that holds the stud for that. So don't turn it too far, or else you're going to end up breaking your ABS hose, and that'll be costly. So, like I said, your pad is held on, the outboard pad is held on by your pins. So you just got to hold them up in place, get them set down in there, and then you can start putting everything back together. Make sure I'm going the right way here. Sometimes they might not sit quite on there quite right. Once you get them where they go, they'll start tightening down. There it goes. Got to get it down in there into the threads. So, yeah. So, before I let you go, something to keep in mind. As far as bleeding these are brand new, so of course the reservoir is going to be empty down here in the caliper. So what I like to do, and what speeds things along and really helps a lot, is tighten down. I'll get that in a minute. So what I usually do is just take and put the catch can underneath it here. I will take the Zerk just loose. Don't take it out. Just take it where it's loose, and you'll start seeing bubbles eventually. Make sure your reservoir up top is topped off with fluid. Once it's topped off with fluid, then come back down here and open this up, and just let it sit here for a while. Eventually, that fluid will gravity feed all the way down that line, and it will eventually fill up that caliper reservoir until it starts coming out of here. And just let it run for just a little bit until you don't see any more bubbles popping up on top of here. Maybe I can get it to do it for us here in a short. And then you'll be able to bleed them out a lot easier, because you're going to have less fluid in the system if you do it that way, or less air in the system if you do it that way. So let me get this side back together, top things off, and we'll be back. Stay tuned. Aha! So, sure enough, we're dripping. Did not take long at all. On this particular caliper, we got a 10 millimeter. So you see the fluid is coming out of there for the focus. Fluid's coming out of there really, really nice and smoothly now. It's going to make bleeding this, when it's really time, a lot easier. We'll just go ahead and tighten this back down for now. Let it sit for a second. See if it'll focus. Just see a little bitty bit of air bubbles in it. Tighten her down again. There's a bubble. See the little itty bitty baby bubbles? We'll get all them out when we actually bleed it with a friend. But for right now, there's another one. There's a big bunch. Lots of little baby bubbles. But we'll get all them when the time comes. There we go. So for the time being, we'll put this little rubber cap back on here. Whoops. There we go. Now we'll go to the other side, repeat the process. So we'll be back. Vantasy's getting there, by golly. Alright folks, we're back. So, ran into an issue on this side when I was trying to take it apart. As you can see, I cut the old line. So this fitting nut doesn't want to come loose from the line, but the line's still good line. So what I'm going to do is reversing. What I'm going to do is break this free, but in order to break it free, what I'm going to do is I'm going to I cut the line, as you can see. I will get it loose here first, and then I'll go ahead and take this clip out, and then I'll be able to take and actually loosen this up and loosen this up separately. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to get this to the point I can pull it out and spin this off and leave the line where it is, and that way I can save the threads, I can save the fitting, and then when I put it back together, hopefully while it's apart, I can break this nut free and get it to spin on this here. A little bit of heat might help on that. But stay tuned, we'll see what we can get figured out here. We'll be back. Okay, we're back. So I ended up getting this loose. Once I got it up there, I got the new hose on. And got the new caliper on, got this all sorted, and now we are just sitting here waiting for fluid to get down in here. Okay, always remember to top this off. So thanks to everything leaking out from having to mess with that extra line, this was low again. It wasn't all the way down, but it was getting quite low, so I just re-topped that off. So we'll come back over here now and we'll spin this back open. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but when I twist it, you can hear the air. And the dog isn't barking. We should be getting fluid here just about any minute. There it goes. Yep, there we go. I knew it was coming. Look at them bubbles. And see all the little bubbles in there. Ooh, couple of big ones. Shut that back down a minute. Let's get our 10mm wrench on her here. Tighten her up a second. We'll let her sit for a second. Now this is just gravity bleeding. This is just to get your fluid full back into your caliper once you're done with your brake assembly. It's always good to gravity bleed first because it takes a lot of trouble and air and all that out of the system way before you ever do anything else to the system. Bubbles all over the place. Something else to keep in mind, once you're done doing all your brakes, once your brakes are all done, put your wheels back on, whatever you have to do, but once your brakes are all done, you've caught everything where you want it. The very first thing you do is you pump that brake pedal. Way before you ever start the car, you pump that brake pedal. If you do not, you will not have any brakes at all. Doesn't matter how good your pads are, your rotors, your shoes, none of that matters. If you don't pump that pedal back up and put that pressure back in that master cylinder, when you turn on that key, you will have nothing and you're going to have to do a whole lot of work all over again. Plus, if you go to back out of your garage and you hit the brakes, you'll have none. So never, ever, ever, when you're done with a brake job, never forget to pump them brake pedal up first before you ever start that car. There's some more bubbles. Bubbly. I usually do this a couple of times and then I'll go ahead and get somebody to help me and we'll bleed them out properly. Go from there. I still have to run a new brake line from the front all the way to the back because my rear one's blown. But for starters, yeah, see, we still got a few good bubbles there, so let her sit there for a second. There's a couple more. Make sure you got your handy catch pan down there. Gotta have that. Don't want this stuff all over the floor. So one of the complaints I had with this van was when I would hit the brakes, situated here, when I would hit the brakes it would pull really, really hard to the left. Usually, 9 times out of 10, I have found In all the years of being a brake technician, usually it's a bad hose that'll do that. Sometimes it's a caliper. Sometimes it's these pins get all corroded and don't move anymore. There's that little bitty barrel that's inside of that caliper there that the pin slides through, and that allows that caliper to slide in and out when you apply the brake pedal. Them seize up, that'll cause it. You know, the main thing is when you pull one side or the other, it's because your brakes have actually locked up on that side and are refusing to let go. So once again, that can be because your slides. It can be because of your pins being rotted into the slides. There's half a dozen things that can cause it. You can have a bad caliper. That piston there could be stuck, you know, to the point that you get one good push and it refuses to go back. But every time I've ever done it, 95% of the time, I'll say, it's a brake line, because brake fluid is highly corrosive. Even in rubber hoses that are made for it, it is still highly corrosive. And by that fluid going in and out of that hose, down to the caliper and back up to the master, it actually frays the inside of that hose over time. And eventually it restricts the flow one way or the other, and it'll hold that caliper on and not let that fluid go back in that hose and release that caliper. And then you'll get a pull left or right. All right, so I do believe, if I can get this to focus, here we go. We don't have very many bubbles now, it's just a good even flow, so I think we're good. Alrighty. So we are good for there. So right now we're going to go ahead and put this little sucker back on there for now until I get a helper to help me actually bleed them. It's always good if you don't have these to get them. I think you can get them at your auto parts store and stuff for your Zerk, just your little Zerk covers. But you always want to keep them Zerks clean and keep the gunk out of the inside of them so they'll actually bleed properly. So anyhow, so RC Rodder and Vantasy, we now have front brakes all redone, other than the caliper, other than the rotors, which actually this one here, I'm going to repack this bearing in here on the outside too, just to be on the safe side. But that'll get me through till spring. But other than that, yeah, next trip is going to be to fix the rear hose, or the rear brake line. So wish me luck. Something else to keep in mind when you're going to get this one here, excuse me, it's going to be easier if you take this big bracket off that goes from here up to your outer bumper end. It's a little bit of a pain to get it around the hose, and you got to be careful when you're getting around your ABS line. You don't want to rip that. But if you can get that out of there, then you can take and get up there and get it fixed. What I like to do, if I can do this one-handed again, of course everything's up here now, but I like to bring it this way, get it up here behind the brake hose, and spin it. Easier said than done to do it with one hand. But to get it just right, there we go. Jeez, that was noisy. Anyhow, so I managed to do that, and now I can go ahead and put it back on. So you just kind of spin it backwards, so you got this angle to go up. You go up underneath the brake hose, kind of get it up in here where you can slide it up in the front down here, spin it, and then you can get it up where you got to go. So anyhow, until next time, have a great night. Stay safe, everyone. And this is RC and Vantasy, and we're slowly getting where we need to be suspension-wise. Thanks for watching. Be sure and subscribe, and there's more to come. Now, Vantasy has all new calipers, hoses, pads, bushings for the sway bar, pitman arm, idler arm, inner and outer tie rod ends, sleeves, center link's been cleaned, painted. So we'll see if the death wobble is gone. If it's not, we'll go next for ball joints and possibly new springs. Definitely going to get some new shocks. But hey, I am so stoked. We had some good weather here in Michigan, so I got the front end all put back together. And I even got Vantasy's new license plate with their new logo on there. So until next time, stay tuned, and happy vanning!